All right, and it looks like we are live. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to a wonderful conversation that I'm really excited to have with some of my colleagues. With me, I have Cheryl, Jim, Kate, and Wendy, who all have these areas of specialty. Today's topic is really going to be around how trapped trauma impacts our vision, our mission, our business, and our legacy in the world. So, welcome, everybody.
Hey, great to be here.
Thanks, Donnie.
Hello.
Yeah, glad to have you here with us. So Kate is really going to help facilitate this conversation with us. So Kate, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do? And we'll do that before we dive into the conversation for everybody.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kate Pintor, and you can see that on the screen. Just fantastically convenient today. And I'm a strengths coach and an emotional intelligence specialist. And so I help entrepreneurs and their teams really perform in a holistic way and in terms of like without taking themselves out or each other out on this journey of building things. I love I got into business at 19 for the personal development. So I'm a little weird. I've been at this game for a long time in terms of I do take on business challenges to grow and expand. And inside of that, what I've realized along the journey is for myself, and that's really I kind of poked Donnie when he started to open this conversation, is on that journey, what it requires to build that success and the current model that we're using. It was really hard to maintain health for me. And I've had periods of my last 15 years where I was permanently disabled, where they weren't even sure if I'd walk again because of the toxic system that I had learned in terms of building it. So I'm really passionate about looking at how to unwire myself for that and help other people to see it. And then also, like, what do I not even know? I don't know about how this whole thing got set up, how business works, and what trauma and what other things might be impacting, instead of always looking to myself to perform for it, like that is the standard, and I just have to fit that. And if I don't, something's wrong with me. And so I'm really honored to be sitting here among people who understand, vision, how marketing works in that way, and then also like really the impacts of trauma, and also understanding what's systemically also going on there that's contributing to this little cluster of hustle culture, which is incredibly toxic. And that's a start. Do you want me to pass over to Cheryl?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Cheryl, I would love for you to introduce who you are and what brought you to that post on Facebook that got us all together.
I think I got invited to come in at the last minute. I just posted something about my just 20-year experience working with race-based trauma and other forms of oppression-based trauma. And I work systemically as a systemic therapist, and I also work as a leadership coach. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Wendy, you want to tell everybody
Hello.
a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dr. Wendy Manchester Ibrahim, and I am the founder of Third Space International, and we are a consulting and training and spiritual caregiving organization. So we create spaces to address all the polarities that are happening in our society and the rigid thinking and the perspective rigidity that people experience. And so we're kind of looking at dealing with this sort of historic trauma and these systems that have been created that are heavy on people's backs, and they might not even realize that they're there. And we're trying to create opportunities to bring people in and say, let's pause, let's take a breath, think, feel, breathe, and then slow down the process so that we can have a more effective future together.
Awesome. And last but not least, Jim.
All right. So yeah, I'm Jim Neisonger, and when I'm honest with myself, the biggest thing that I care about in the world is the fact that there are so many people who have spent decades, lifetimes of developing a high level of specialty expertise that can really help people. Yet when it goes to putting that out into the world, somehow they minimize it. They turn it into something that it's not, instead of that genius that wants to come through them and serve the world. And part of the reason that this topic gets my attention is because we've all been punished for our genius, rewarded emotionally, financially for our mediocrity. We've been conditioned into minimizing the hell out of ourselves instead of delivering what we're here to deliver. And that a lot of the learning that we've gone through is a result of trauma, and there are gifts on the other side of it, but there are also some serious traps there that we have to learn how to negotiate.
I can already feel myself like about to burst with excitement about this conversation. And so for those of you who don't know me, I am Donnie Hill. I'm a business strategist and marketing strategist. But part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I don't like boxes. I hate frameworks. My soul came into this body to break frameworks. I'm a Black, sane, gender-loving man. And I didn't realize just how much that piece of my identity impacted how I show up in my work and how I show up in my business and my relationships. I recently had a conversation with a colleague of ours who was saying, Donnie, I feel like your work right now is all about coming out, and coming out meaning the pieces where I haven't been speaking my truth in my marketing, or haven't been sharing my real genius, or haven't been owning my full strengths, or haven't fully looked at some of the traumas that have been trapped in my body, or that have been trapped in my own emotional development. And so part of the beauty of this panel is that you all come at trauma and business and leadership development from such different angles. So I'm excited to see where this particular conversation goes.
Awesome.
So, yeah, Kate, where should we dive in?
I'm imagining that there are people here who are recognizing that moving their vision forward in 2020 was complicated. Like I have not met a single person who found, they're like, oh, this is easy now. It's like, actually, they're on many levels. It's like, it's really revealed a sort of our capacity for showing up for it. But one of the things that I was thinking about when I started stalking Donnie and texting him, I was just wondering if there's this high level thinking of how does trauma impact. So I kind of like to start with that so that people have an understanding. When sometimes I walk in an assumption that people understand that their story, they know exactly how their story is impacting that vision moving forward. And I think we need to set that frame first of just like, how does that impact? Like what even might they be noticing? And Cheryl, if I could lead with you, because you work in this capacity so much, how does trauma impact us? And anything you want to share would be great to sort of take the cap off for people to understand.
Sure. There's so many, it's almost like a multi-dimensional thing to talk about, because you're looking at the mind, the body, the spirit. You're looking at community, you're looking at trauma that happens as a collective in systems. And you're looking at interdependent situations sometimes, which we call trauma bonds. And so if we're looking at the mind, oftentimes there's beliefs, and sometimes they're so subconscious, right? Like when I work with some of my leadership, coaching clients or clients in therapy, there's oftentimes these, like, even on a relational level, we can have these like, oh, if I get too close to someone, something bad will happen. If I get too successful, this bad thing will happen, right? Or I need to be super independent and really get through everything on my own, because if I depend on others, this thing will happen. And so we hold these beliefs, these thought processes, sometimes on such a subconscious level, we don't even know that there's a trauma we're holding that's propelling a belief. It's also primarily because it's in the limbic system, the part of the brain that responds to something traumatic. We can either get, if we're triggered by this trauma, we can either get hypervigilant and really anxious and looking around for the danger. And we don't even know that this sometimes becomes a part of our personality. We're always looking out for that bad thing, right? Or we can dull the senses so much that we don't feel anymore. We're slightly dull or numb. There's certain objects, things, situations where we feel like just a numbness and we don't really know what it is. So, and then the trauma gets, it's almost like a sense memory. It's in the muscles. So the greatest example I've had is like, I went for a recent major operation, removing this tumor. And I didn't know this, but my muscles were holding on to this pain for almost 2 decades. And so even though the tumor is gone now, my muscles are still behaving as if the pain is there. So I'm still experiencing some of the pain. It's healing every day. And I have to subconsciously just kind of tell myself, it's no longer there. Let go, let go. And literally, like, advise my muscles to let go and breathe and ground, right? And it's so trauma has this thing, even though that event is no longer there, right? Supposing this was a single event, right? Even though the event is over, it's still in our system. But sometimes we live in systems where this trauma is ongoing. It's like, there's a certain threat in the area constantly, whether it's on a race-based level or homophobia, transphobia, a class issue where there's just this, thing that's happening. And so it's hard because it's in the environment, right? And then you're just holding it and you don't even know because you've lived in this system for so long, right? And then there's the interpersonal part of trauma where sometimes we replicate stories with others. And we call this a trauma bond, where almost like Stockholm syndrome, where we find people in business to partner up with, but they replicate some harm that we've experienced in the past. And it's our system trying to seek wholeness again. That's why it keeps repeating this story. It wants to find closure. It wants to finally find that healing and that wholeness, but it doesn't know how yet. And so that's where I that's the work that I do, is, okay, how can we find this completion and wholeness again? And there's so many different types of therapies, so many different coaches out there that help people do this work. But anyway, that's long introduction, but I thought I'd share. Yeah.
That's great. I love the simplicity to it and how you described it. And that story is so profound. That's good. I'm going to remember that. Wendy, would you like add on to this? I feel like you gave it.
Yeah, just amazing, because as I'm listening to Cheryl, I'm thinking about how these things happen in our bodies, and then they're replicated in our family systems, and then they get replicated in our neighborhoods and in our societies and ultimately in our cultures. And it's amazing because our cells actually have memory of these things. And epigenetically, I know Cheryl and I had a separate conversation about this online once. And Kate and I have had background conversations about this, but cells actually can hold on to memory for 14 generations. So when you look at what we're going through in our country at this point in time, with race and with religion and with economics and all of the things and all of the trauma that has just been carried down into our bodies, it takes that, like Cheryl was describing, saying, oh, wait a minute, the trauma is not happening in the moment. Of course, we're under a whole different set of trauma right now, and we're all experiencing that. A pandemic is trauma in and of itself, and all of the race-based tensions we have going on and economic tensions. But if we can just stop and say, oh, wait a minute, that's the 14th, 13th, 12th generation of trauma. Let's slow it down and find ways to release that. I think for me, looking to what the healing is, but that's another piece for me. We're kind of addicted to resiliency in our culture right now, that it's like, oh yeah, I can pick myself right back up and I can get right back to it. And we're missing that pause that is necessary to heal the trauma and release the trauma. And then I share a story similar to Kate's, that I ended up 3 years disabled because I had some trauma that I had internalized, and it took me some time to really learn how to release that. And it's a daily thing to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy.
A thing that I'd like to just add there is Wendy and I have had even some of these conversations where I think we agree on this perspective. At least I know that this was part of the perspective that I had, is that our society is so based on avoidance of the pain that is residing within people that like Facebook. Okay, so we're broadcasting on the biggest trauma avoidance, recovery avoidance mechanism on the planet right now. I mean, this is how systemized it is to let's feel better in the moment about something. Let's get some attention and take it off of the fact that we are hurt in some way. And there's something there that gets to shift.
One of the beauties of what you all pointed to, and Wendy, you in particular, is like we're at this pivot point now where we're getting to pause. And I think the pandemic is forcing us to pause. Like back in the Bay Area, things are going on lockdown again around the holidays. Like we can't go anywhere or do anything other than be with ourselves. And in a lot of ways, it's beautiful because it's giving us that opportunity to really take some time to reflect and be with the pain and figure out like, oh man, this is really uncomfortable. But if I don't sit with it and process it, then it's going to continue to perpetuate itself. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is not continuing that perpetuation or finding alternatives that are more beneficial. So I love that you all have pointed out just how much trauma is about saying, hey, something's not working and we need to find an alternative solution. And what I'm really hoping that the listeners get today is that we begin to provide them with some new solutions and ways of thinking about their pain or their trauma and how to relate to it in a way that is going to be more beneficial to them, but also to begin finding new ways of moving forward that recognizes, hey, this is part of my trauma and I don't have to be bound by it. I can take it and continue to move and do something differently in my life.
And I'd like to add to that, for those of us who are practitioners, how to learn how to be present with other people's trauma in a way that helps them release it and not just enable them to stay stuck in it. It's this really delicate balance.
Jim, I would love to, if you could piggyback onto that statement, because when we look at marketing, I'm a marketing consultant and I've done a lot of work with Jim and I've learned a lot from Jim. But when you see, how do you see that showing up in terms of people messaging their work?
Well, the biggest thing that I see is that I would call this almost, it feels like a very universal trauma response in the marketing that people do when they have a legitimate expertise that they've developed, is that they are doing validation seeking marketing. It doesn't matter if they get clients, as long as they get some validation, they get some likes, that they get that thing soothed within them that hasn't been addressed. While at the exact same time, the people that they are most qualified to help, they are sitting there waiting for somebody to say, hey, I have something that can help you. If this is your exact situation and this is what's going on, I have something, let's talk about it. And so we do this safety, like, okay, let me get picked, instead of, no, marketing is go out there and pick the people that you're here to serve, because you've worked your ass off for decades to develop some expertise for this person. Tell them, don't wait and see if you can get a like. So guess that's my little rant at the moment.
That's so perfect. Validation seeking marketing. What are some others that you see? Cheryl, what do you notice in how people language their gifts from a clinical perspective? What do you notice in the marketing trend?
I think when I think about marketing as a system, I think about it as different transactions, when not business transactions necessarily, but human transactions, right? And so there's a stimulus coming from someone and we're looking for a response. And sometimes if we're doing this from a trauma lens, meaning we're coming from our limbic systems, we're replicating this trauma that we have with this world. Similarly, when I look at it, the flip side of this, sometimes there is sales and marketing that feeds on trauma. So, I mean, I don't know how many ads come up for me on Facebook about skin whitening. And I don't know what algorithm there is, because obviously I'm not the target market, but for some reason, right? But there are people with race-based trauma, right? Around their skin tone, around their looks. And this totally creates a trauma bond with it. You are traumatized in this area, so I'm just actually going to use this and get more profit out of this. So there's a capitalism that isn't very conscious around some of this stuff too. So I'm not sure if I'm completely answering, but I think there's two sides to this marketing question. Is there's marketing that comes from a trauma lens, and then there's marketing that feeds on trauma. And so it's like this system that I think I see happening.
Yeah, Donnie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been, I guess, exploring in my own business and looking at with my clients is, what does truth actually look like and sound like in sales and marketing? And a lot of this has come from my work with Jim and my work with Jeffrey around creating your courageous message. It's like, all right, well, this doesn't work. I can do this. I can do the trauma-based marketing. I can do the validation-seeking marketing. But internally, it doesn't feel an integrity with me anymore. And so now there's almost this rediscovery process of what does this new sales and marketing look like, or what does truth-based sales and marketing really look like? And some days I'm like, this is awesome. And some days I'm thinking, holy shit, this is really scary.
Yeah.
Because it's about saying what's real, and it's counter to what most people see and experience when they're on the receiving side of sales and marketing. So I think for me, when I look at business and sales and marketing, it's really about how do I help guide people to finding their truth around whatever it is that they're offering, so that they can talk about it in a way that is in integrity with them, but it's also really helpful to the person on the receiving end. I recognize that not all of my services are for everybody. So part of truth in sales and marketing for me means saying, you know what, I don't think this is actually going to work. One, because that's not what you need right now in order to help you move forward. But two, it might be that we don't align in values. And so now I'm really being invited to speak to my values in my sales and in my marketing conversations, so people know where I stand about certain things. And that for me is edgy. It comes back to the coming out piece of like, oh, this might not be safe, but that's exactly the place that I have to go if I'm going to be in integrity with helping people navigate and find a new way.
That's beautiful. When I think about the process of, so as a strengths coach, I have a lot of people that want just the cookies. That's what I call it. They just want the cookies from the jar. They're not ready for what comes. And so I know if they're searching for those cookies, that's what they think is going to solve whatever problem they're walking in with. And so being aligned and in truth in this last year was for me to decide I don't sell cookies, but not knowing how, in an industry where they're like, why are you doing it that way? That's not what this tool was created for. They're like, but there's a level of integrity and just saying most of the people that are coming, the problem that they're showing up with isn't the real problem that they have. And so how can we be with that and meet them at that level where they're coming in from, also understanding that along that journey, there's more there. I don't know, Wendy, if you want to unpack that at all.
Well, the thing that I'm thinking about is we're on the verge potentially of a dramatic transformation of society and how we do society. I know, Jim, you and I have talked a lot about, like, we've collectively created things that we don't want over and over and over again by doing it. And so what I'm noticing in the marketing that's kind of coming my way is this kind of aggressive, let's keep the hierarchy the same. Let's try and get ourselves to the top of the pile. And it's aggressive, and in contrast to where we have the potential to go, which is what I'm trying to tune into, this sort of emerging future of possibility. This aggressive, like, let's try to get to the top and beat everyone else, just feels really at worst aggressive. And then sometimes I'm just like, oh, I really wish we could just bring everyone else along, of let's just go with the wave of the transformation and start to have conversations differently and include that in the way that we sell to each other. And the values-based piece, communicating, Donna, that really triggered in me. I'm like, oh yeah, communicating the values to make sure we're getting everyone on board value-wise is super important with everything we're offering out there.
One piece that feels like maybe this is a good time to put it in here as well is something that is generally known as the fundamental attribution error. That it's a cognitive bias that we all have, that we overvalue the things that we worked hard at and we undervalue the things that are easy for us. And so quite often a trauma response, so the fastest, most effective, longest lasting way of impacting the unconscious mind is through trauma. So then now this new set of behaviors becomes easy. Some of it is, it serves towards outcomes you want. Some of it detracts from the outcomes that you want. But those are all effects of it, like with a drug, for example. The things they call side effects are not side effects. Those are also effects. They're just different than what we're trying to market you on. And so there's this array of effects. So I don't like to view trauma as this entirely bad thing that we must banish, and because I don't know how we prevent it, for one thing. Plus, it always has gifts and value, but we need to be able to recognize, okay, when have we mined the gifts and we're ready to heal this thing? Because most genius is developed by some response to adverse situations that we just didn't know how to deal with. And so I'm just like cautious in those two areas of wanting to make sure not to make trauma totally this complete big villain. And then also just the fact that we are so terrible at discerning what's really working and what's not working, because our automatic behaviors are always on 24/7.
That's why we need each other. We need partners, building collaboratively and interdependently instead of that individual model now. And then what I found this year, Wendy and I worked together with a group of just to create more connection during all of the ebbs and flows of what was happening in pandemic, so that we could find where the content is. Like, I'm not getting exactly find my content anywhere, even though I know how to make it. And I know how to tell you how to make it and to help you make it. I can't find the button that helps me to produce the content, like it wasn't happening. But in connection with each other and in that mirroring, we were able to sort of get that going again. But it's an us game, not an I game, and that's what I'm hoping we're learning in that model can move forward.
And Jim, you made me think about something of when you were talking about finding the gifts in the trauma. I think one of the things I found in my work is a lot of my work is around compassionate communication. And I realize a lot of my compassionate communication comes because I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of non-compassionate communication. Oh, you're an N-word. Oh, you're a faggot. Oh, you're a monk. And so I know that feeling. And so I don't want to push that onto other people. So in a lot of ways, it's forced me to really become more conscientious of how I communicate with people. But also I recognize that people come to me because they want to know how to communicate more compassionately and more candidly. And so thank you for that reminder, because I think that's really important as people look at their work, as they look at their relationships, is looking for what am I learning through my trauma, or what have I learned through my trauma, in addition to, okay, I also know that I need to do some healing around it.
Yeah, and just one very fast thing is that, I just don't see how people will allow us to support them if we don't have compassion and empathy for them to when it really matters. And so that, to me, that's a lot of what you're speaking to there as well.
Cheryl, one of the questions that came in, and I'd like to get other people's perspectives, but I think you can help us with this one, was how do we find the balance of addressing our trauma without letting that process control us?
Yeah, I think so I'll just speak from an evidence-based perspective. Like, what Jim was describing is what's called, for research, is called post-traumatic growth. And this thing is parallel to the symptoms of trauma. So even though someone could have all these incredible amount of post-traumatic growth, it doesn't mean that your traumatic symptoms disappear. So you could still be having hypervigilance, depression, flashbacks, of whatever, trauma that's still in your body and your mind and your spirit, but still have all this growth. And I think that those two things are not mutually exclusive, and they influence each other. Sometimes, for example, Donnie, you were talking about how some of the oppression-based trauma for you has resulted in, a value of compassion, right? And almost like an extra sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
And I think for some people, the flip side of that is a hypervigilance. Like, am I getting it right? Am I okay? Are other people okay? So there's often this almost like a duality to what's happening with trauma, and they're not mutually exclusive. They influence each other. If, let's say, there's a part of your trauma that has led to you being extra careful about getting things right, for example, and the result is that you produce really beautiful things, right? But you could, maybe get yourself involved in a business or a coaching situation where this perfectionism becomes really harmful for you, right? And then someone keeps telling you, be resilient, be strong, grow. But then there's this other side, this obsessive feature inside of you that's harming you, that's hurting your body. So I think it's oftentimes looking at this like it's multidimensional rather than just one thing. It's not just growth, it's also this pain and suffering that is oftentimes collective and systemic and intergenerational. And so all these pieces really could be seen as a whole rather than just one thing or the other. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it did. I think it's bringing forward, like, there's duality to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we have to remember to flip the coin or when we're working on any piece of it, because, and I'm just thinking about like my own personal examples, like there's a lot of growth that has happened, and there's also a lot of healing that's still happening. Like right now, part of my process is I'm searching for a therapist to talk through some of these other things that that have begun to surface as I continue to grow and make changes in my own life. And I think that's a really important piece of the equation to call out, because even though you're grown from it, like you mentioned, it doesn't mean that it still doesn't hurt or that it doesn't impact you in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's impacting you on a somatic level that you don't even have any awareness of. And I have personally been very invested in personal development and therapy for 30 years. And after Kate's recommendation, found a somatic experiencing therapist that I've been working with for the last year. And over the last 3 months following an injury, it's become really clear that I am storing the effects of my traumatic birth experience, not giving birth, but being born into the world. So 55 years ago, my whole system experienced trauma, and there are still things that I'm allowing to release so that I can move forward and be a functioning human being.
And it's, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say, if by any chance I gave any perception that I believe that it's appropriate to do the healing work and really get some of these things out of our system so that we're no longer hijacked. I didn't mean to give that. I don't think I did, but just in case, I'm fully for healing these traumas.
I was thinking so much, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I love working with, where I'm looking for neurodiverse people, and people who have had physical trauma or in physical disability, because it's something that I navigate from my whole life. And the hardest thing for me in business, and just to speak to those that are going through, if you're here and you're watching, and you are trying to reconcile that your body feels like it's constantly traumatizing you, because tomorrow you don't know what resource you have, and the next day, and like the weather might change that for you or something else. And so when it's such a beautiful opportunity for us to see the healing that's still there, but it's not a loop that we close when it's with our body. And so the understanding of that fight or flight, and bringing and integrating and partnering with people that you can really have like a multidisciplinary team, so that you can stay upright, or lay down. I have people that remind me to do that, because I'm still going to be me this whole time that I'm growing this. And sometimes I'm going to love the business, and sometimes for me, my body's like, yeah, that's not working for us. And so having flexible vision and a flexible goal, and not buying into what you're reading in the algorithm about what you don't have that they're trying to sell you. It's like really coming back here and trusting that, and partnering with people who can reflect that truth in you, so that you're not consumerized and moving away from being here, which is how you're going to serve the most. And it's a daily negotiation, hourly negotiation for me to feel not in trauma with how my body is holding it, even to be on Zoom this year, and to not have the flow of that whole body, and to counteract that I'm seeing people in these little squares, and we're missing the nuance that's there, and even in how we have to hold and show up. And so looking for ways to bring that flexibility, and honoring that you are not a face in a box that goes live and people can plug into you, and you don't have to live your whole life out in that capacity. We're re-traumatizing ourselves when we play the game that we're being sold, and we don't have to stay plugged into that. That's my rant.
I do have a question, and I'm not sure what's going to come up because I'm still thinking about my own answer. But everybody on this panel has access to resources. They have a great support system around them. But there are a lot of people who don't have the resources, and they don't have the support around them. And so they're dealing with trauma on a whole nother level that we might be able to understand or not be able to understand. So if people are listening and they don't have the support, or they don't have the resources, what are some things that you would share with them that you think they could do to help them navigate this space?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is I haven't done a lot of this, but when at the times that I have done it, it has been helpful each time. And so Byron Katie has this body of work that she calls The Work. And it's a simple set of questions that you work through that really help you to identify and question some of the assumptions that you're building some of your thoughts and statements on. I found that to be something that is helpful. I would not say, oh yeah, that's going to take care of trauma at all, but it's something that can help you get into find some new perspectives.
For me, I feel like anytime that I've been, I spent a period of time, 7 years ago now. Oh, it's getting further in the past. That's nice. Where I had so much brain inflammation from an infection that I wasn't able to read. And anyone who knows me, I'm a study fanatic. I always have 6 books going at one time. And so having the inability to read and walk was very challenging. I was alone by myself a lot of the time. And in that time, I really learned like embodiment practices and spiritual connection practices. And that looks really different for everyone. And most people these days, not everyone, unfortunately, but most people have access to things like YouTube, where you can find short 5 or 10-minute embodiment practices, yoga, Tai Chi, breathing, things like that to just really get grounded and anchored into your body. And then connecting to whatever practices work for you, depending on your faith tradition and your background. It could be just a short prayer. For me, I do Sufi chanting. There are different things that can just open up your heart and help you feel supported kind of on a metaphysical level while you're slogging through the difficulty of the trauma of the moment.
Thank you. Cheryl or Kate, would you add anything?
I'll share. So this is something that I use all the time. It's activating the vagus nerve, and I posted it on Facebook recently and it almost gets you into a meditative state almost immediately. It also gets your central nervous system to go in the opposite direction from activated to calming down. So you sort of, in your mouth, you sort of will saliva to be produced. And you just take a moment to do that. Like, we can all try it if you want to. And just having saliva be there, you can feel almost like this state of consciousness shift, right? Other technique is the butterfly technique, butterfly tapping. You almost give yourself a hug like this. And you do your vagus nerve activation, you breathe, and you just do left tap, right tap, left tap, right tap. And you just keep going until you start to feel a little more grounded. Last technique is the 5 senses. What do you see? Find something visual to focus on. Find something to hear and just focus on that. Something to taste. So just go through the 5 senses. Something to touch. Just go through all the senses almost to get back into a grounding space. So those are techniques that I share. Something that works for me.
I love that, Cheryl. I think, I don't know, I was thinking it was Susie Gruber, who was my somatic experiencing coach, but there was like a vagus nerve but I can't find it anywhere. And I'm like, I feel like if I do this, am I activating the vagus nerve? Or is it just, I'm just giving myself a hug and that's okay too. I don't need to know why it works. I feel like if you put your hand, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's working for me. I feel like the parasympathetic is kicking in. I would say to younger people also, I wrote my way out of my wheelchair. Like I did Julia Cameron's Artist Way. And I was not good at holding emotion because we didn't value emotion. I didn't have a language for it. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. It just came in like a million thoughts all at once. And so to really understand what am I experiencing, that was my first layer. So it began just like from my brain out my pen and doing morning pages and developing that ability to extract it. And then I could determine how many of those thoughts were actually true. and it was just the energetic management. It really came out of my pen. That's what worked for me personally. And that's free most of the time, although paper right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of writing. I have writing my phone, I have writing my notebook. And I realized as I was listening to you all, a lot of my trauma has been around either self-honoring or remembering that I matter into some capacity, because a lot of my messaging growing up was that I didn't. And so a lot of the practices that I'm doing now are about self-appreciation or self-acknowledgement in some form or fashion. So I'm just having to really like examine myself and think about the intrinsic qualities that I have that are valuable. And it's a beautiful practice, but when I first started, I'm like, this is BS. This is so difficult, because there was a lot more you're not worthy or you're insignificant than there was, oh, you're beautiful, you're worthy, you're wanted, you're needed, etc. So I really encourage finding those practices if you can.
So I'm hesitant to share this, so it feels like it's important for me to, is that I had a situation over this past weekend that was highly escalated for me, and it was reactivated this morning. So I'm in this highly escalated state, and I actually worked myself through, it is probably going to sound cheesy, but I worked myself through my own marketing process to sell myself on the solution available to me. And so it consists of 9 questions, basically. First, who do I choose to be in this situation? Because I was hijacked, and so I was not at choice of who I was being. The second is, okay, what are the untapped resources that I have available to me to bring to this? Then third, what's the vision for my greatest vision for this, at least from right now where I'm at? What do I see as the greatest vision for this? Then the fourth question is, all right, what is really frustrating to me about this? What do I hate about this? And just then from that place, like I could get that out, like, all right, journaled that out. And then what are the hidden patterns here that I haven't been seeing? When just asking that question, you find some things that you've been either hiding from yourself or didn't know that were there. So did that. And then the sixth question is, okay, what are the inevitable consequences? If I choose to keep this thing in place, knowing what I know now, having these resources, having this vision, knowing who I'm choosing to be, and I choose to keep this in place, what are the inevitable consequences? What happens? And so I was highly motivated for a solution, which then kick into the 3 sides of the solution is, so the 7th question is, all right, so what exact conditions are required for that vision to start becoming reality? Okay, these are the conditions. What is the specific, like, highest leverage? That question number 8, what's the highest leverage to make that start to happen? And then the 9th question is, okay, so what is my irresistible offer to myself? What am I going to do? Because now I'm so motivated that I'm going to do something here. What's my irresistible next step for myself? And it was amazing how much things shifted, because I don't normally get this emotionally hijacked, but man, I was so in it this morning. And that was the specific process that I used to work my way out of it. And I was amazed at the result, actually.
The thing that I love so much about everybody's share is that it was all a tool that didn't cost anything, but it was also something that you walk yourself through in situations where you're feeling hijacked or you're feeling agitated or you can't get out of bed. And I think that's really important, because people are in so many different emotional states right now, whether it's agitation or fear or frustration. And so thank you for sharing, how you go about helping yourself, because I think autonomy and self-reliance is really important to people. They want to know that they have choice and that they have the ability to do things themselves. And they also want to know that there are resources available to them as well. So before we wrap up, I would love to hear everybody's one wish for humanity.
What I was thinking as you asked that, and I'm like, I think it's the same answer, because in this moment, we're gonna not do this perfectly. But the thought I had simultaneously of you asking that question was, my wish for humanity, and I'll say this for my white humanity people as well, because this is really important, is that we practice jumping out of our containers into other people's pools. Like that one skill of learning to get out of everything that you know and go swim in somebody else's pool, and just keep doing that. I did that all the way in my personal development. That's really how my life went into recovery. It was to stop trying to eat at this table I've already ate at with the people that eat like I eat. And it's just to start valuing, come over here where nothing makes sense and you have, nobody needs you, and just be. Or come over here where you're not in charge, you have no responsibility, and experience yourself and experience others where you have nothing to give. And just learning that's really been the most healing part of my life. And I think how others have experienced more love from me, the more I'm willing to do that. So it's just eat differently, try new foods, but like literally don't swim in your own backyard. Like make it a daily practice to hang around people who don't think like you do, and learn to be and connect there.
Okay, I'll go next then. So before I give my wish, I'll talk about the deepest pain first that when I look out into the world, the thing that pains me the most, the things that disturbs me the most, is that there is not a problem that exists in the world that doesn't have a root cause, deep solution that is already created, identified, ready to be delivered to that situation. And it's heart-wrenching to me to see how many problems and the solutions are not lining up, they're not matching up with each other. And so if there's anything that I wish for humanity, is that we start seeing, recognizing, applauding, acknowledging these brilliant solutions, promoting them, delivering them, helping them get delivered to the places where they're most needed, regardless of what kind of package it comes in, of a person's skin color, gender, race, whatever the different things are, what language it comes in. I don't care. It doesn't matter what the packaging is that it comes in. It's just so ridiculous that we have so much brilliance on this planet to overcome every problem that exists, and we're not letting it happen.
Yeah, I think for me, part of, I like your pain solution framework. So I think I'm gonna try and frame mine in that. I think the biggest pain that I see that I'd like for us to address is how much we've tied our value as human beings to what we do versus who we be. And so if we do the thing, then we get celebrated, we get applauded, we get recognized for it, we get paid for it. And if we don't do the thing, then we're somehow less than. And that whole model is crap. And my wish for humanity is that we get celebrated for who we are which has no labels. It's like you're this being and you exist on this planet. Therefore, you are worthy, you matter, you're important, you're needed. And I really, that's part of my mission is to help people remember that. And I think that's part of everybody's mission on this panel in whatever form or fashion you're bringing it to the table, because we need to remember it.
So when I think about the problem solution, because Jim is such a good mentor, one, I just love being on a call with a marketing person who will come to tears over how important this work is. It's just really powerful. For me, I just think that we're experiencing such tremendous divisions. And I don't think, I mean, that sounds obvious, but if you really start to peel away at it, we're divided from ourselves. We're divided from seeing ourselves as sacred beings worthy of honor and understanding, our highest selves. And so I feel like we're all on, for my wish for humanity is that everyone would find that mission and yes, use whatever your religious tools and pathways are, but not use those religious tools and dogmas to be cruel or violent to other people, that we have so many paths to the same way of understanding the God and divine. And one of my things is really tracing that back from, ancient history, but that we get to use our paths to understanding God and understanding the sacredness in ourselves and understanding the sacredness in our communities and our ways of socializing, and then also reconnecting to this glorious planet that we've been given as a home. And I found an old piece of writing I did like 25 years ago that I was writing about making vegetable soup. And I was marveling at how amazing it was to have so many different textures and smells and colors and put them all together and make this amazing thing that could heal me. I had a sinus infection at the time. And I wrote that I believe the best pathway to God is appreciating our food. And it's like that simple. We've been given all these incredible gifts. The resources are so abundant, and yet we divide ourselves. And the image, Kate, of you talking about us having to see each other in these little boxes is so representative of what we're doing. And just to the thought of expanding, like my chest is opening. It's like, let's just expand out of those boxes and see each other heart to heart and soul to soul. And we would have a completely different humanity if we could do that.
I will say, Wendy, the space holding that you do in these boxes with like healing the social divide, it's the most connection I've had in a box since this whole box thing started. It was like, I'm like, oh my word, this is the most human I felt and the most human everybody else felt, like since the beginning of time.
Yay.
Whatever you do in those boxes is working.
Yeah. Oh, I'll share. I keep saying since 2020 and the whole COVID-19 trauma and everything that's happened, I keep saying that our reconnection is our salvation. Mm-hmm. And if we feel pain from this division and this sense of being divided, of being, stacked up against each other, and then this division is so painful. And we're feeling this on a traumatic level, and I think, Donnie, you said something that really stood out, is like when you started to affirm yourself, that there was this feeling of BS that came up. And it's actually really common for me when I work with trauma, because especially with relational and systemic trauma, where we're so traumatized and hurt around connection that when we actually are given the opportunity to connect with ourselves or with others, this juxtaposition of this sacred feel next to the trauma almost becomes disgust, right? And so my wish for humanity is to reclaim our humanity again and connect with the planet, and really our reconnection is our salvation, I think. And we are truly in pain, And I think the absence from the pain is the trauma. We're dissociated from this pain, and dissociation is a trauma symptom. So reconnecting to this pain on some level and desiring relationship, like I feel so connected with all of you here because we did something around our healing today, you know. So yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, we're going to wrap this up. But before we go, I just want each of you to share how people can connect with you or reach out to you if they're interested in learning more about your work. Jim, you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah. I don't know. The easiest way these days is probably through Facebook, a friend request or a message or whatever. It seems like it's probably the easiest way. And since this video is going to be there, and maybe you see my name, I think it's in the video as well. So yeah, that'd be the easiest.
Great. Wendy, you want to share your information with people?
Sure. Also, Facebook is probably the easiest way to reach me. You can find my business page at the Third Space with Wendy Ibrahim, or my personal account, Wendy Manchester Ibrahim, and I'll be glad to connect.
Kate and Cheryl?
I'm at leadingwithconsciousness.com, and you can find my name, Cheryl Leong, Leong, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram.
You can find me at katepintor.com or just message me on Facebook and Instagram, Coach Kate Pintor. A good way to stay in the flow of what's happening there.
Wonderful. Well, everybody, it has been a really beautiful conversation. Thank you all for carving out some time in your day to be with us, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all soon.
Thanks, Donnie.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.